What is the science of reading? What are leaders doing to accelerate reading achievement? We answer these questions and more in Science of Reading Leadership, Guiding Minds, Transforming Lives, powered by Just Right Reader.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Science of Reading Leadership Podcast. We have an amazing guest for you today. We have Crystal Parten, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning in Greene County Schools in Georgia. Prior to this position, Crystal supported the Regional Services Agency for 7 years as a content literacy specialist. And that was after serving as a high school history teacher and adjunct professor at several Georgia colleges. Crystal, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Christy. I'm excited.
Yay. Well, Crystal, we start off every podcast with the same question. We always ask our guests, what got you into education? What inspired you to become a teacher?
Well, I come from a family of educators. My parents were both educators. My grandparents were both educators. My great-grandparents were educators. My aunts are educators. And so the one thing I was not going to be when I went to college was an educator. And here I am. So it's if you're born with it, you're born with it. That's what I think.
I love that. Did you say even your great-grandparents were educators? Wow, that's incredible. Crystal, I'm really curious. As somebody who started in secondary, we get a lot of district leaders on here who, were in elementary or they were in elementary special education in particular. So they really knew the challenges of students learning how to read, but you were a secondary teacher.
Right.
So tell me kind of about your journey, because I know that science of reading is really important to the work that you do now in your role. So tell me kind of about that journey of learning about the science of reading to prepare you for this role now.
So as I started out as a high school history teacher, and as I went a non-traditional route. So I got my degree in history in college. I got my master's degree in history. And so I didn't even go through the education degree program. And so in starting teaching high school history, I was in 11th grade primarily. I taught co-taught classes all the way up to AP classes. And even in 11th grade AP, I would have students come in and their reading skills were poor, their writing skills were poor. They didn't comprehend a lot of things that it was just kind of like, this is common sense. I remember one girl asking me, what is this word? And the word was foreign. Another time I had a student say to me, his writing was just atrocious. And I said, you've got to spell things correctly. Well, I'm dyslexic. And in my mind, a dyslexic student wouldn't have been in AP.
Right.
And that really started my questioning of what is happening, and can a dyslexic student be in an advanced class? Spoiler alert, they can. And how are kids getting to me and not being able to read? And as I started to read articles and books and try and figure it out, I landed on a lot of strategies at first, how to get kids to access the text, how to get kids interested in reading. And that helped for a while, but it never really got down to the how do kids learn to read. So yeah, it really started with a student telling me that they were dyslexic. And when I got that job as the content literacy specialist, I had the opportunity to take a reading and a dyslexia endorsement. And through working with kids in that, meeting experts that I ended up even working with at RESA in dyslexia and in reading, I learned, about how to determine where a child's difficulty begins. And that helped me work with teachers. And I think it would have revolutionized my practice as a high school teacher if I had understood where some of these problems came from and how to get students the intervention or the help that they need.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was an 8th grade teacher. And I remember somehow I got invited to an elementary professional development, and they were talking about all of the assessments, including the phonics assessments that they give students throughout elementary. And they were discussing, should we send these assessments up to the middle school level? Would teachers be interested in them? And I remember looking at these assessments and saying, my kids are coming to middle school not knowing what the bossy E does to a word. And I know we don't call it bossy anymore, but, and just being like, that would have also revolutionized my teaching, or at least my understanding of where to have an entry point with students. So completely agree on that front.
Right.
How big is your school district, and what are some of the demographics surrounding it?
We're very small. We
Okay.
have about 100 students at grade level. We have
Okay.
3 schools in our main school districts, and I'll explain that in a second. So we have an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. We
Okay.
also have a local charter school, but they are a local charter school, but they run independently. So really, when I'm talking about Greene County schools, I'm really talking about the core 3. Right now, it's Greene County Primary School, Carson Middle School, and Greene County High School. We're rural. We're rural, and we have a large population of low socioeconomic students. But we also live in an area that's close to a pretty important golf course in the state of Georgia, and the Ritz. So we have a good tech space. So it's a diverse rural area. Yeah.
Very interesting. So let's talk about what kind of are you doing in your role for this school district to establish your instructional infrastructure and establish high quality literacy instruction?
Well, it really does start with understanding how students learn to read, or how people learn to read.
Yeah.
We also had a brand new ELA, or reading instructional coach, hired at the primary school. And fortunately for us, we hit the jackpot of all jackpots with instructional coaches for literacy, because she knew everything there was to know about the science of reading. And she was one of those who had done her own research and everything herself. A former EIP teacher, reading teacher. So the fusion of us together right there, when I first took the job, I think was serendipitous. And what we were able to do is first do an assessment of what do our teachers know and understand, and what do they not. And so we started with the why, and we laid that down. Here's what the research says. Here's what we've been doing. Here's where we're headed. Here are what the laws are that are coming down. And we started with that.
What did you find, Crystal, when you were looking into, and kind of, was it a formal assessment that you were using, or an informal, kind of inventory of just talking to people in terms of trying to figure out what your teachers already knew about the science of reading?
I did a lot of listening my first few months, really, in the job, but we had decisions to make in the first few weeks.
Right.
I mean, there were curriculum decisions that we were late on because I had taken the job, and the budget was due, and the orders were due in, and so I listened a lot, but we also had to make some really fast judgments. So in order to determine what the teachers knew and understood and all that, it was more about listening. When it came to the curriculum, we did an audit. So I just had everything listed that we have, in the building, that we have with instructional technology, what's anything we're using with reading instruction, or ELA, the language side instruction. What are we using? And when we did that audit, I mean, lists of things.
That's fascinating too, in a single building. I'm sure the list would be even longer if in districts that are a little larger with even more elementary schools.
Yes, I was shocked. I mean, we had competing type programs going on. We had interventions that wouldn't really have fit with the approach of the general reading curriculum. Sure. It was varied. Now, none of the resources that I was looking at historically would have been bad choices. Sure. Okay. It was just, there were a lot of them. And the more that this movement and learning about the science of reading has taken off, the more we would have known, this probably wasn't the best choice. But at the time that they were adopted, they were great materials. They were the ones everybody was saying to get, but there were so many different ones. So we had to cull that down. And I will tell you, the first thing that we did curriculum wise, after we learned, our teachers really haven't heard about this. They're really doing things in a balanced literacy way, and they haven't been given professional development on science of reading and structured literacy. We looked at the curriculum, and we had a choice. I would not say that this is the best decision to make in every curriculum decision opportunity. However, I was new, the instructional coach was new, the laws were coming down, and our choice was we're getting rid of all of it. And we're going to start, our first start is going to be with a foundational literacy curriculum. We went with UFLI, University of Florida Literacy Institute materials. And we had given them the why. We got the curriculum and we did intense training with it over the first 6 months. And we didn't receive a whole lot of, angry calls or, oh my gosh, what am I going to do without X, Y, and Z? Our teachers were phenomenal in going through that change. What we did not add in place of all of this stuff was a rigorous, specific ELA curriculum on top of the foundational. It was a lot of change all at one time. But to throw away the baby with the bathwater was a really hard call. But it just wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work a different way. There were so many different things they were using. If it stayed in the building, it's easier to go back to what we knew, and it would be harder to make the change. And our teachers just, I could not thank them enough for really working with us and trusting the direction that we were taking, and they've done phenomenally with it.
I'm gonna say that's a lot of trust for two new people, right, to come in and say, hey, these are all going away and this is what we're doing now. So that shows incredible trust on the part of your teachers.
Oh, and the administration, I need to throw that in there. I shouldn't have left that out. The administration had to put a lot of trust in us too, and still have to. And so having people who are willing to, take a risk, be bold, and trust that we're making the right decision together. And we did include teachers and admin as part of that decision-making process. But at the end of the day, I said, this is the way we need to go if we're going to, if we're going to start to get in compliance with the laws, but also do the right thing by kids.
This episode is brought to you by Just Right Reader. From pre-emergent through developing readers, Just Right Reader supports every student's full journey to confident, independent reading in English and Spanish. Following a rigorous phonics progression, Just Right Reader decodables provide the structured phonics practice in English or Spanish that leads to reading success. To learn more, visit justrightreader.com.
You kind of talked about the foundation of your infrastructure really centered around teacher knowledge and the material side. I know that there's going to be more branches that you continue to add into your infrastructure as you continue to go along. What have you seen so far be the biggest successes of the work that you've already put into place in the short time that you've been in Greene County?
It's multi-layered. It always will be. I'll say having an instructional coach who really understands the science of reading and understands the curriculum that you're trying to put in place, you're not going to be able to replace that. And so Jen Harper, who's our instructional coach, she knew it, she ran with it, she was able to give really good, focused professional development, high intensity professional development across the year on the foundational curriculum. Without somebody who the teachers can go with to questions at any point, can text them with questions, can email them questions, without having somebody who's going in and looking at the dosage and the intensity of the literacy instruction and saying, ooh, we need to sharpen this up. I'm going to come in and do a mini PL on X, Y, and Z. Without that, I know we wouldn't have been as successful. So the teachers felt not only prepared because we gave them the why, supported because they had somebody really who was anything that they needed, she could provide. Any question they had, she could answer. And then high quality professional development that we didn't have to go outside to look for because she was qualified to do it. I would also say with our UFLI adoption, all of that is free and online. But what we did was we downloaded everything. We decided, okay, what needs to be printed? What do teachers need to have their hands on? Because it is not going to be effective if they have to go and click here and click here and click here. And we want books in hands. We don't want everything just up on a screen. If we're talking about literacy, books need to be in hands of teachers and of students. So we printed the decodables and we got them bound. We worked with a printer to create an actual, I don't know, letter board. So we did a lot of the work to make sure that they would have the resources that they would need to teach the curriculum. So adopting a free curriculum was great, but it wasn't free because we made sure that it wasn't just going to be a technology resource. It was going to be hands-on, tangible resources that they didn't have to actually print and cut and paste and do everything themselves. So those 4 things would be the reason why we've seen such success, such buy-in to this new way of teaching kids how to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Crystal, I'd love for you to talk more about decodables, because I talk to district leaders across the country and building leaders for that matter too across the country. And I've noticed that has been kind of a different shift of going from level text to decodables. Tell me what the impact that you've seen in terms of making that shift on the teacher side, the instruction side, the student achievement side.
There has been some confusion, especially when we first started, about how do I use a decodable? So when we did our professional development through UFly, as Jen was taking the teachers through this, we said, you know what, we'll get there. We're just going to hold off. Let's work on this first. Let's work on the 30-minute lesson, and sure. Let's work on our sound wall, or, you know, those kind of things. But as we got closer to looking at the decodables, there were a lot of questions about small groups, and then how do I do this? And so again, she was able to give some professional development on that. And I think we still have some growth to do on how to use decodables properly, effectively. One thing that we noticed was we had tons of resources in the building, no decodables. Searching for decodables to use in addition to what came with the UFly foundations, we found, oh my goodness, well, a lot of what's out there is not 100% decodable. Ensure that parents understand what this even means. I wonder how they're using this in the classroom. So I think it's important that we're able to communicate that to parents. So there have been a lot of questions about how to make that transition. So we're still working on it. One thing that we did do in our district was we applied to be a Just Right Reader pilot.
Oh, yeah.
And we were able to bring in and identify 40 students at our elementary school who, you know, needed that extra help and that we thought we could grow. And so we were able to do that, send them home with decodable texts. And when I tell you, number one, we saw so much engagement with our teachers who were part of this pilot. They expressed how much they loved working with the decodables, how it was easy and it was structured. They discussed how parents started calling and saying, when are the next books coming? Are my kids going to get more books? The students were able to begin reading faster and found that success and that confidence faster than they would have in a leveled text.
Right.
And so all of the benefits of that has started to kind of make its way through the teachers, and they're talking about, you know, the success that the kids are finding through decodable text. So I'm weaving through that question to say, we're not perfect at this yet. We are still looking at how to do this better. I know that we have teachers who still need to understand and do more work with what this looks like in their classroom. But we are trying to incorporate more and more into our practice, especially, you know, at the lower grade levels, so that they're able to read faster with more confidence. And it really does inspire that love of reading. A lot of, you may hear, or I know I did when I first started getting into the science of reading and structured literacy, but the joy of reading will be taken away. It's so, you know, it's so rigid. And that's not what you see. When you see these kids working through decodable books, you see them, oh, I can read that word. I know that sound. And they are excited. So I've seen a lot of benefits to using them, and to using not just sticking with what comes with your particular curriculum, because it may not be enough. You really, in our experience, we're finding we need a whole lot more than what comes with it because they are reading it, and we need more resources to keep them reading more.
I love that. And you just hit the nail on the head there. It's really hard to find joy in reading when you can't read the words. So,
right.
So hopefully, yeah, we know that decodables can definitely promote the joy of reading. You also mentioned working with families a little bit. And I would love to know, I know you're still early in your journey in this school district. So we know we can't take on every initiative in our very first year in a place, but I'd love to know a little bit more about what have you discussed as a district in terms of the parents' role in literacy. What are ways that you either have or are thinking about getting families involved in the literacy journey? Just tell us more about your thoughts and plans there.
We are still very early in these types of conversations, but we are having them. I'll start with, okay, when I took the job last year, it wasn't just a few weeks. My superintendent came to me, he said, we have this big tree outside, right outside our office. And the pre-K is actually in our building. And he said, we have this big tree. What if we made it the reading tree? I was like, great. So things like, and we did this big event around giving away books and read alouds at the reading tree for our elementary last summer. And so number one, I'm going to include the reading tree in some of our events to encourage family literacy and to get parents involved. So I just thought that was a really neat way to.
I love that your superintendent's thinking about it too, right? It's like a very top down which is important too. We need to have top down and bottom up initiatives. And I love that your superintendent is thinking about how do we as a community infuse reading into what we're doing.
The tree has lights on it. And so at night in the summer, for just a little bit of the night, it shines. That's just cool. To remind people, that's the reading tree, you read. But I think little things like that, where we can do fun event type things where we bring families and the community in. That's going to be important. And we're talking about authors that we can bring in and literacy nights. We will have a district literacy team that helps create some of those events. So on the surface, that's one thing. What we are going to do before the end of the year is have I wouldn't call it an event, a meeting of the parents who their children went through the Just Right Reader pilot. Okay. And we're going to have them come in. We're going to talk to them about their experience with the books and then how they could use them over the summer. And we know that if we can get more books in hands of kids in their home, and that our parents know how to utilize and encourage it, then we'll be better off. But events that we plan as a literacy team, utilizing, bringing in authors and encouraging the community, that kind of thing, but also bringing parents together as we make this switch, talking to them about what we're doing in each class, sending home letters that talk about, this is what we're doing in this unit. This is how we're learning to read. These are the sounds that they're learning, giving them resources like links to what letter sounds. What are the letter sounds? Because a lot of people don't know.
If they weren't taught, you would know.
I didn't know, right? So what does M say? Ma? No, and when our own educators don't know this, especially secondary educators, we can't expect our parents to. So there's a level of education that we've got to put out there too for our community and for our parents. Another thing that I have on my mind is working with our community partners. We have community partners who come in, they work with pre-K, they might work with our little kids, reading aloud to them or in partner reading or doing little lessons. They also need education so that we don't have competing initiatives within the school and so that we don't have competing viewpoints outside of school in the home.
I love that. That's so important to make sure that we don't have competing initiatives in our schools, that all of the instruction our students receiving is really streamlined and purposeful throughout their pre-K through 12 journey with us. Crystal, we're getting close to the end of our time together. We always ask the same question to end our podcast. And this is a tricky one. I think it's hard to boil it all down. So you're first year director of teaching and learning. At this point in your career with your journey, what 2 pieces of advice would you give to another district leader who is trying to accelerate reading achievement in their own district?
The first piece of advice is to be bold and to not take this is the way we've done it or we can't as an answer. The other thing I would say is make sure that your stakeholders, starting with your teachers and administrators, understand what you're doing, when you're going to do it, and why you're going to do it. I think that really, really helped us make the transition from balanced literacy to more structured literacy. And it's going to continue to help us as we implement a high quality instructional material for ELA next year, in addition to UFly. And I would also say, don't skimp on the support for it. So ensuring that if we're expecting them to use manipulatives, they have them in their hands. If we're expecting them to do read alouds, they have the book in their hands. If we're expecting them, if we expect them to do whatever it is, that they have the materials and then the support that they need. So again, I can't understate the value of having people in the building who know the science of reading and structured literacy, who know the curriculum that you're using. So that's more than 2, but it is a triangle. All of those things work together, I think, to make a more confident and supported staff when they go to teach these precious students.
Thank you so much. I think that I love the guidance and the wisdom that you have already gleaned and that you're willing to share with us. You've made amazing changes in such a short time in your district, and I know that they're lucky to have you. Crystal, thanks so much for spending your time with us today. We have learned so much from your wisdom and experiences in Greene County. That's all the time we have. So thanks to our listeners for joining us on this week's episode of Science of Reading Leadership Podcast. Bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We will see you next time on Science of Reading Leadership, guiding minds, transforming lives.